Trafford's face was twitching as McCoy had never seen it twitch before.
I cannot say how much I regret what happened. I should have anticipated such a turn of events. I should have sent more guards to escort you.
Once again, there were 8 of them in the Hall of Government. McCoy, Jim, Scotty, the ambassador, and the 4 Manteel ministers. The tension in the air was almost palpable.
You acted as you saw fit, First Minister. There is no need for self-recrimination.
Even with a dermaplast patch over one eye, Farquhar was as insufferably diplomatic as ever.
And, with all due respect, even a dozen guards wouldn't have been able to keep the Oberat in line, not after what happened to those 2 young men. It appears the Oberat have gotten their hands on a supply of phaser pistols. We will have to find their source and cut it off. In the meanwhile, we have waited long enough. It is time to sit down and work out a solution. We can begin this afternoon.
I agree. The sooner the better.
First Minister, I'd like to make a recommendation. I know how closely you embrace your religious beliefs, but wouldn't it serve everyone's interests, the Kubayas included, if you were to keep the animals away from the sacred precinct, if only for a little while?
Captain, I believe we are overstepping our bounds. We didn't come here to remold the cultural values of...
Despite the ambassador's protest, Kirk plunged on.
Consider the safety of the beasts, First Minister. Imagine if the Oberat had chosen to attack the Kubaya that came through in the first wave, instead of waiting and hoping for a solution. They could have slaughtered the animals wholesale. Maybe next time they will. As you point out, Captain Kirk, there is much at stake. However, there will be no discussion of curbing the rangings of the Kubaya. Not for a day, not even for a minute. If necessary, we will increase our security in the precinct, but we will not compromise our beliefs.
McCoy cursed inwardly. In other words, he thought, thanks for the help, but next time keep it to yourself. Trafford looked to the ambassador.
This afternoon, then.
This afternoon, First Minister.
The room they occupied was almost as large as the Hall of Government, and with its tall, stained-glass windows just as impressive, too.
How could you have said such a thing, Captain? How could you have even considered it?
Kirk shrugged, concentrating on the stained-glass images and not on the ambassador's voice. That way, there was at least a chance he'd get through this without blowing up.
Seemed like a good idea at the time. It could hardly have been a worse idea. That's the problem with having ship's personnel participate in diplomatic endeavors.
The captain wasn't going to take the bait. He wasn't. He was going to memorize every detail of these fine stained glass works of art, right down to the number of Kubaya in them, which was considerable.
Fine. Ignore me. See how far that gets you.
And with that, he strutted out of the chamber, leaving a razor-edged silence in his wake. Scotty was the one who finally broke it.
Of all the self-important, narrow-minded, stubborn fops.
You can say that again, Mr. Scott. I had him pegged from the moment I laid eyes on him.
So you did, Bones. And I was foolish enough to try to talk you out of it. Obviously, he's forgotten you saved his worthless hide not so long ago.
Worthless hide indeed.
I just wish there were some way to defuse the situation before the death toll starts to mount. If we could get in touch with those 2 Oberat ministers, Meniki and Omelas, see the matter from their angle, maybe we could get some fresh ideas.
Bones looked at him thoughtfully.
Worthless hide. Maybe there is a way. What are you saying, Doctor? You 2 stay here. I'll be right back. There's something I want you to try on.
Shading his eyes from this world's blinding white sun, Lutek wiped his eyes on his sleeve. How many hours of this could a Klingon take? As he approached the top of the slope, he made out a deep basin of a valley up ahead. Like everything else here, it was reddish-brown. More importantly, one of the walls was pocked with a series of openings, caves, natural hiding places, and shelter from the biting winds, which a pack of children would need in order to survive up here. Smiling to himself, taking out his disruptor, Lutek made his way down into the basin. With his hunter's strides, it didn't take long at all to close the gap. Finally, he reached his destination, a small ledge directly above the first cave. Gathering himself, he dropped and twisted, training his weapon on the darkness within. The children might be in the cave's recesses, he thought, but he couldn't be sure. After the blinding light of the sun, the interior of the place looked pitch black to him. Careful to stay alert, Lutek advanced into the darkness. He made out vague shapes. Training his disruptor on them, he advanced a little further. The shapes still didn't move, not even with the gentle rise and fall of the chest area that usually denoted sleep. Coming closer, he saw why. They weren't children, they were just rocks. Lutek nudged one with his foot. It rolled away. Suddenly, a red ball of agony exploded in the Klingon's temple, dropping him to one knee. Lutek flung up his hands to protect himself, angry and confused. Something big and heavy hit his right hand, the one that held the disruptor, but he managed to hang onto it. Squinting through the blood that was running into his eyes, he made out a number of small forms swarming like carrion creatures around a carcass. Pointing his weapon at the nearest of them, he started to depress the trigger. That's when he felt something on his shoulder and whirled to look up at a larger form than any of the others. He barely made out the features of a full-grown Vulcan before a thicker darkness engulfed him. The Klingon went limp in Spock's grasp. Letting go, he watched the inert body slump to the ground. Then he took stock of the children who stood around him, 3 boys and 2 girls, each armed with a rather substantial-looking rock.
This was a trap?
A boy with black hair and narrow features nodded eagerly.
Yes, sir. We spotted the Klingon a long way off, so we were ready for him. And when he went into the cave, we came in after him with our rocks and...
You need not explain. I believe I understand your stratagem.
The boy stopped, disappointed. The Vulcan was sorry for that, but there were more important matters to be dealt with right now. Squatting, Spock took the disruptor from the Klingon's fingers and tucked it into his sample pouch. Then, slipping his hands beneath the Klingon's armpits, he dragged him into the back of the cave. Finally, he checked the Klingon's belt for food and found a number of heavy brown grain pellets. Not very appealing, but they would have to do. The youngsters looked at the Klingon fare hungrily. Without a thought for himself, Spock gave out the pellets and watched the children wolf them down. But one of the boys, peering at him from beneath tangled blonde curls, handed half his allotment back.
You have to eat too.
Spock shook his head.
My needs are different.
The child had no reason not to believe him. Shrugging, he gobbled down the remainder of his pellets. Some of the youngsters were better at concealing their fears than others. The blond boy seemed to be the best of all. There was something about him that Spock found familiar. The Vulcan just couldn't put his finger on it. The boy spoke up.
What are the Klingons after, anyway? This world is not all that distant from the Klingon Empire. They may simply be asserting their right to it. However, it is also possible they have received intelligence about the colony's work and wish to seize whatever new technologies have been developed.
The youngster grunted.
Well, that makes sense. What does not make sense is your assault on the Klingon.
The children looked at him as if he just admitted he was a Klingon himself. Perhaps he had been too abrupt in changing topics.
But we got him. With my help. In any case, I cannot allow a repeat of the maneuver. It is too dangerous.
They looked at him with hard eyes and hard faces.
We've got to help our parents. I am certain your parents would prefer you to be safe, to retreat into the hills as far as you can, and to stay there until help arrives.
The blond boy looked at him shrewdly.
And what about you? What are you going to do? I do not know yet.
You're going to try to help the people back in the colony.
If circumstances allow, I will no doubt make an attempt. And won't your chances be better if you get some help?
It was quite logical. The Vulcan gave the blond boy credit.
My chances of helping your parents will be greater, yes. But my chances of losing you will also be greater. It will be a trade-off.
The boy shook his head.
We're not just going to run away and hide. We're going to help, with you or without you.
Spock cocked an eyebrow. Apparently, he had little choice in the matter. If the children could not be convinced to retreat to a safer place, he would have to protect them. And the only way to do that was to join forces with them.
Very well. We will work together. However, you must follow my directions. If we are to lay traps for our pursuers, they must be more efficient than the one that caught him.
He tilted his head to indicate the Klingon. The blond boy nodded.
You got a deal. I will need to know your names. Mine is Spock.
For the first time, the blond child seemed reticent.
David.
I'm Pfeffer.
Garcia.
Medford.
Juan.
Spock couldn't help but notice that they all used their last names, all except for David. He was the only one who'd given the Vulcan his first name, and reluctantly at that. There was more to the blond boy than met the eye, Spock decided. This time, when they visited the sacred precinct of the Oberat, no one even glanced in their direction. It felt more than a little strange after the hostility they'd encountered the day before. Kirk made a mental note to describe the experience to Bones. After all, it was the doctor who had equipped them with facial prosthetics, subdermal dyes, and optical overlays, all designed to make them look like Malurians. Before long, they came to the open-air market they'd glimpsed during their official visit. The crowd was thin now. Some of the merchants were even starting to pack up their wares for the evening. Looks like as good a place to start as any, Mr. Scott.
After you, sir.
As they approached the square, the captain scanned the stalls. Some offered fresh vegetables. Others displayed long, ornate robes of a vaguely religious-looking nature, and still others showed metal or ceramic cookware. About midway across the far side of the marketplace, there was an open doorway with a number of Oberats standing just inside it. They all appeared to have mugs in their hands.
I may not know much, sir, but I can spot a tavern a mile away.
And information flows fast and loose where there's liquor to loosen the tongue. Come on. Crossing the plaza, they walked up to the open doorway as if they belonged there. Some of the Oberats stopped their conversations and glanced curiously at the newcomers, but no one challenged them. Inside, they found what they had expected. Meager lighting, shadowy corners full of tables, and a vaguely conspiratorial drone of voices. Moving to the bar, Kirk procured 2 mugs and laid down a number of Malurian coins. From the way the bartender's eyes lit up, he gathered that he'd handed over more than he had to. Then, mugs in hand, he and Scotty found an unoccupied table in the darkest of the place's 4 corners. Glancing at the next table, he tried to think of the best way to start a dialogue with some Oberat. Finally, he opted for the direct approach, raising his mug to one of the patrons. "Good day."
They've been worse, they've been better.
"You're new here, aren't you?"
Yes, we are.
Hell of a time to visit, what with all the trouble that's going on.
Actually, it's the trouble that's prompted the visit.
Oh? Got family here you're worried about?
In a sense. I mean, aren't we all brothers when you come down to it?
That's the way I feel. He indicated the other 2 seated at his table.
In fact, that's how we all feel.
Kirk turned to Scotty. "You see, I told you we'd find good reception in this place."
If you cannot find solidarity here in these trying times, where can you find it? Times are trying, all right. Just yesterday, the damned Mantil marched a procession of off-worlders and armed guards through the precinct. It was a slap in the face, a reminder of how little they respect us.
Second Oberat spoke up.
True, but we taught them they couldn't do that kind of thing.
A couple of our boys took one of their guards down.
The first Oberat made a gesture of dismissal.
Now, that was nothing to be proud of. We lost 2 to their 1, and they weren't much more than babies. Well, at least we showed them. At least we didn't let it go unnoticed like we'd done in the past.
The first Oberat dismissed that idea as well.
So what? It's not going to make them stop abusing the sacred ground.
The third man at the table, who had been silent up until now, finally spoke.
They'll never stop that. Not unless we make them. But there's time enough for that, and no need to lose young lives in the process.
The first Oberat turned to the captain and Scotty again.
Sorry, you didn't come here to listen to us argue, did you?
With all due respect, no. One can hear the same arguments wherever there are Oberat. He looked around as if leery of spies.
Though there are some in the precinct I'd give much to listen to.
All 3 of his listeners nodded gravely.
I believe I know who you mean. Do you know where we might find them?
It seemed to Kirk the men knew, but were reluctant to say. In the end, however, their caution gave way.
Well, if you like, we can take you to them.
We'd like that very much. Reaching an unspoken consensus, the Oberat raised their mugs and drained them. Kirk and Scotty did the same.
Come.
The first Oberat made his way toward the door. The disguised humans followed, and the other 2 Oberat brought up the rear. Outside, it was full sunset. They crossed the plaza, with its tables and booths now empty of merchants, retracing some of the steps Kirk and Scotty had taken minutes earlier. However, instead of heading for the broad thoroughfare, the Oberat led them another way, into the narrowest street they'd seen yet. As they entered the cool, deep-shadowed space between the buildings, the captain could see that the passage eventually ended in a cul-de-sac. About halfway there, one of the Oberat turned to Scotty.
Where'd you say you were from again? We dinna say, but we're from Toril. Never been there myself. Nice place? Oh, the nicest.
The man had no chance to inquire further because one of his comrades stopped and knocked sharply on a door. It opened. A pair of silvery eyes caught the light, flickering as they glanced from one caller to the next.
It's all right. They're friends.
The sentinel grunted, turned to others deeper within and barked something the captain couldn't quite make out. Then he gestured for them to come inside. They entered, moving slowly because it was difficult to see, even more so after the door closed behind the last of them. Reaching out instinctively, Kirk felt a wall and followed it. They went on that way for a while. Then a small flare of blue light erupted off to their right. A moment later, a second flare ignited on their left. Even before his eyes adjusted to the illumination, the captain could see that they were at the threshold of a large room, and it was full of Oberat, perhaps a dozen of them. One of his escorts stepped forward and indicated the humans with a gesture.
A couple of visitors from Toril. Come to confer with our leaders.
One of the men in the room eyed them.
Interesting. I'm from Toril, and I've never seen them before in my life.
Suddenly, Scotty took a crushing blow to the back of his head. As the engineer crumpled, Kirk whirled, expecting more of the same. He barely eluded a meaty fist that would have laid him out alongside Scotty. Then, gripping his attacker's wrist with both hands, he flung the man over his shoulder. Screaming with pain, the Oberat hurtled into 2 of his comrades. At the same time, Kirk went for Scotty, aiming to scoop him up and make for the exit. Unfortunately, it didn't work out that way. He barely lifted Scotty off the ground before something hit him hard in the side of the head. His last thought before he lost consciousness was that all McCoy's hard work had been for nothing. Farquhar glared at McCoy from the other side of the doctor's desk.
They did what?
McCoy scowled.
They went back to the precinct. By themselves? What in blazes were they thinking? Probably that they'd be able to end this conflict sooner with some input from the Oberat. They just went to meet with the Oberat, just like that?
No, not just like that. They took some precautions first, like some minor facial surgery to make them look like Malurians. The ambassador looked at him, amazed. You performed surgery on them? Damn it, it was the only way to give them a shot at finding Meniki and Omelas. I figured... Oh, so it was your idea. Yes, it was my blasted idea. They needed to get close to the missing ministers. This was a way to do that. But they were supposed to have been back by now. Something's happened to them. I can feel it in my bones. And what would you have me do about it? Tell the council? That's exactly right. The council may be the only hope they've got now. Farquhar looked at him as if he were crazy. I meant that as a joke. If the council sent a squad into the precinct right now, it might destroy what little chance for peace still exists. And if they don't, the captain and Scotty may be goners. We can't risk the lives of thousands, maybe millions, to save a couple of foolhardy Starfleet adventurers. Those foolhardy adventurers saved your bacon not so long ago. How dare you write them off like that? I wasn't the one who told them to go back to the precinct. I wasn't the one who suggested they risk their lives. Oh, that stung, even more so because McCoy knew that the ambassador was right. All right, damn it, you win. We won't go to the council. We'll just keep our fingers crossed and hope that Jim and Scotty come out of this alive. Jim? You call your captain by his first name? Well, is there anything wrong with that? You know, Ambassador, there's more to life and diplomacy than protocol. For the first time since they met, McCoy had the feeling that Farquhar was listening to him, really listening to him. Then the old stiffness came back into the man's spine, and he tugged down on his tunic. I'm going to beam down alone. If the ministers ask, I'll say that the captain and his people were required to, address some technical problem. Fine. Tell them whatever you want. The doctor didn't give a damn what excuse the ambassador gave the council. He was too preoccupied with the fate of his friends. Halfway to the door, Farquhar stopped and turned back. Dr. McCoy, I just want you to know that I'm concerned about them as well, even if I don't show it. Bones glanced at him, more than a little surprised. Well, thanks. You're welcome. Then he turned again and exited the doctor's office. Under Spock's painstaking guidance, the disruptor's blue beam cut a large chunk of foliated rock out of the hillside. Finally, the chunk of rock fell free. Now came the part that required some finesse. Spock would have to separate the various laminate leaves of which the rock was constructed. Kneeling, he sighted the disruptor along the fault line of the top layer, then depressed the firing pad again. The beam sliced the leaves apart, starting with the left-hand edge and working its way to the right. A few seconds later, the top laminate was free. The Vulcan stepped back to judge his handiwork. By that time, the children had begun to gather around for a closer look. Pfeffer looked up at Spock. Can we touch it? Is it hot? You may indeed touch it. You may even lift it up. The boy's eyes lit up. Taking the edge of the laminate in his hands, he pulled at it experimentally. It moved easily. Careful. It is brittle. Miss Medford, would you help Mr. Pfeffer? Eagerly, Medford picked up the other end of the leaf. Together, she and the red-haired boy carried it down to the strip of level ground below. Can I help carry the next one? I see no reason why not. Again, the Vulcan applied his disruptor beam. A moment later, Juan and Garcia were carrying another leaf down the hill. Only one more laminate was required. With great care, Spock went to work again, and this cut was the cleanest of all. Allowing the beam to lapse, he placed the disruptor back in his sample pouch. And none too soon. The sun was dropping quickly in the west. Soon it would be too dark to use the weapon without drawing attention to themselves. David looked up at him. Everyone else was at the bottom of the hill. Want a hand? Please. Together they lifted the sheet of rock and brought it down to where the others were waiting for them.
As the children watched, still hardly believing one could take apart a rock as if it were a sandwich, they set the laminate down near the others. The Vulcan scanned the terrain to make sure there were no Klingons approaching. Then he turned his attention to the pit. It was a man's height in diameter and twice as deep, excavated only minutes earlier by the force of the borrowed disruptor. Spock took the Klingon weapon out again and cut a slot in the hole. "What's that for?" "The idea, Mr. Garcia, is to take one of these leaves we've carried here and place the bottom edge of it in the slot. Then to lean the other edge up against the side of the pit. The second leaf will rest on the first at a more or less perpendicular angle, and the third will rest on the second." "Oh, like a house of cards." "Yes. We will cover the topmost sheet with loose dirt and pack it. With a little care, it will look like part of the path."
Oh, I get it. When someone steps on it, he falls in.
That is correct. The brittle top sheet of rock will give way, followed by the one below it and the one below that, until our passerby finds himself at the bottom of the hole. Now, we must hurry. It is necessary to cover this hole while we still have the light.
Captain, wake up!
Even before he threw off the last heavy tatters of his stupor, Kirk recognized the voice as Scotty's. As he opened his eyes, he'd already begun to put together the features that went with the voice: the round face, the brown eyes full of intelligence and good cheer. He wasn't prepared for the deep-set silver orbs that peered at him out of a leathery visage. If he'd been able to, he would have jumped to his feet. Unfortunately, that wasn't an option, not with the thick, coarse ropes binding his hands and feet.
"Sir, are you all right? For a minute I thought they'd brained you."
The captain managed to smile.
"No, Scotty, I've still got my wits, or most of them anyway. They've taken our communicators, sir."
Kirk nodded. Their captors had been thorough. He turned from Scotty to survey their surroundings. They were in a small chamber with a single window. A door was set into the far wall. Kirk was certain it was locked and well guarded. Not that escape was their top priority. They'd come here to establish a dialogue with the Oberat, and that was what they were going to do. 3 Oberat entered the room, 2 of them armed with phasers.
"They're awake. Get them on their feet."
The phaser bearers did as they were told. Each of them took an arm and hauled a prisoner up off the floor. Kirk offered no resistance.
"Damned Manteel spies! Who sent you? And for what purpose?" "Before we get into all that, I should tell you we're not what we seem. We're aliens, members of the Federation diplomatic team assigned here. This is all the product of prosthetics and subdermal dyes. Underneath, we're human." "And I suppose it's a way to prove what you say?" "You could open my shirt. The disguise only covers our faces and hands." "Do as he says, Zabit."
The one called Zabit tucked his phaser into his belt behind him so that the prisoner couldn't grab it, and began unfastening the front of Kirk's tunic. After a moment, he gasped.
"Oh, they really are the off-worlders." "Yes, and we didn't come here to spy on you. We came to find the Oberat ministers, Meniki and Omelas. We wanted to hear their side of the story." "Sorry to disappoint you, but Meniki and Omelas are not here. And even if they were, they would not waste time speaking with you. There's no possibility of reconciliation with the Manteel. They are too obsessed with their damned Kubaya." "Perhaps we should let Meniki and Omelas make that decision. After all..." "Enough! I do not need an off-worlder to tell me what is best for my people."
There was something about the way he said it that gave Kirk pause. Suddenly, he realized why.
"You're one of the ministers, aren't you?" "Yes, I am Meniki. So you see, when I say I do not believe your intervention will accomplish anything, I know whereof I speak. You've nae even tried it. If you'd only come back to the negotiation table, you'd see. See what? That our sacred places are meaningless? Less important than a herd of dirty beasts? All right, then. Stay here and do what you have to. but give us a better idea of what your needs are so we can try to formulate a solution.
The minister shook his head. He looked incredulous.
Do you truly believe we will let you go after you've seen our hiding place?
The captain's mouth went dry. This was definitely not a positive development.
That wouldn't be very intelligent, Minister. You may have taken our communicators, but my people know we're in the precinct. If we're gone too long, they'll tell Trafford. We do not fear Trafford.
Meneke turned to his fellow Oberat.
Dispose of them.
His comrades raised their phasers, and Kirk had no doubt about the level of destruction the weapons were set for.
Excuse me, but I would like to try a different approach.
A hunched and elderly figure came through the doorway.
Release them, Meneke. You are too trusting, Omelas.
Omelas? Kirk eyed the older man in a new light.
Maybe you are not trusting enough, Meneke. This off-worlder offers a way to settle our dispute without further bloodshed. Is that not worth taking a few chances? I say it again. Release them.
The younger man thought about it, his captives' lives hanging in the balance. Finally, he reached a decision, if a reluctant one.
Do as Omelas says.
Omelas led them to a windowless room. As Kirk and Scotty watched, he crossed to the chest of drawers that stood against the wall.
You say you wish to understand the Oberat?
Opening one of the drawers, Omelas extracted 3 ancient-looking leather-bound books. With unmistakable reverence, he placed them on the table.
All you need to know of us, you will find in these.
Kirk reached out and touched the nearest of the tomes. As he'd guessed, the leather was oily to the touch, obviously well cared for. Sitting down, the minister drew one of the books to him and opened it to the first delicate yellowed page. Tilting his head, he indicated his wish that the humans follow suit. Carefully, they did just that, and so began their education in the ways of the Oberat. Veled seethed with anger.
Say that again, Krug.
The first officer seems to have vanished, Captain. Also those with him. Only Dirat and Rogue are left, and they've been unable to find the children.
How difficult can it be to find a pack of human brats? If you wish, I will take a second squad and investigate. No, stay here, Krug. Until I return, you are in charge of the mission.
Until you return, Excellency?
Yes, I'm going out there myself to finish the job that Gidris started. You may find yourself first officer of the Kadenra sooner than any of us expected, Krug.
I'm pleased to serve you in whatever capacity you deem appropriate.
I'll bet you are. Now, round up some men for me, and good ones. Chorl, Engath, Norg, Zorag, and the Niknash, Grail. We've already wasted more than a day on this foolishness.
McCoy was in sickbay, lost in thought, when he sensed someone else's presence. Whirling, he saw 2 Malurians standing behind him. Then he realized that they weren't Malurians at all.
Jim, Scotty. In the flesh, Doctor, if not exactly our own. I was starting to wonder what happened to you two. At one point, in fact, I even wondered out loud to the ambassador.
The captain looked at him and frowned. At least McCoy thought it was a frown. It was hard to tell with Kirk's prosthesis getting in the way.
Sorry, Jim, I was worried.
It's all right, Bones, I understand. Now, if you're not too busy, could you get this thing off my face? Actually, it was Mr. Scott who had his prosthesis applied first. In all fairness, his should be the first to come off. While he was waiting, Kirk activated an intercom unit. "How's it going up there, Mr. Sulu?" The helmsman had been sitting in for the captain up on the bridge.
Couldn't be better, sir. Welcome back.
"Thank you, Lieutenant. How's my fire blossom doing?"
Fine, sir. Why? Can't you smell it from there?
Carry on, Lieutenant. By then, the doctor had excised the bulk of the prosthesis from Scotty's face. The engineer's skin was still black and his eyes were still silver, but at least his features had been restored. "Oh, but it feels good to get that off." "So, did you two get what you went down there for?" "Hard to say, Doctor. We managed to speak with Omelas and Meniki. We even got a chance to read the Oberat's holy scriptures, but we're still not within sniffing distance of..." "Damn it, Bones! That's it! Blazes, Jim! I'm trying to conduct surgery here. What the devil are you shouting about?" "I've got the solution, Doctor. The answer to the Malurian's problem. And wait till you hear what it is." He could get used to being in charge, Krug told himself. He placed his feet up on the desk in front of him. Yes, he could get used to it very easily. "Second officer, I have news from the Kadenra, from the security chief. There's been an accident." "What?" Leaping to his feet, Krug growled and snapped his communicator off his belt. "Security, what's going on up there?"
We've had an explosion in the cargo hold next to the warp engines.
"Any idea who did it?"
None, but damage is extensive. We're limited to impulse power.
"I want those engines ready again in a matter of hours, and see to it that the culprit's found. The captain won't want to hear that there's a saboteur in our ranks."
Aye, sir.
Krug put away his communicator and glared at the messenger. "Well, what are you waiting for? Get back to what you were doing." The man didn't need to be told twice. Alone again, Krug pounded his fist on the desk in front of him. A saboteur. It was an outrage. And if security didn't find him soon... Suddenly, Krug didn't feel quite so comfortable being in charge. There was a feeling of hostility in the hall of government that had not been there before. Kirk couldn't help but notice it as he, McCoy, and Scotty followed Farquhar into the chamber. Trafford and the other Manteel ministers stood grim-faced around their conference table. A monitor stood before one of the windows, dark for now, but soon to be illuminated with the images of Omelas and Meniki. Stopping before Trafford, Farquhar put his fingers to his temples. "We are grateful for your indulgence, First Minister."
If you can stop the bloodshed, Ambassador, it is we who will be grateful. Though I must remind you, our dedication to the Kubaya has not diminished, nor will we yield on the subject of their rights and well-being.
"We understand, First Minister."
Then let us proceed.
At a sign from Trafford, a guard moved to activate the monitor. A moment later, the screen came alive. It showed Omelas and Meniki in a bare, windowless room, one that gave no hint of where they might be. After all, there was no guarantee that the Federation's plan would work, and if it didn't, the Oberat didn't want to give away their whereabouts. Omelas looked at Trafford.
Good day, First Minister. And to you, colleague. Perhaps it will be a good day for all of us.
All eyes fell on Kirk. Taking a deep breath, he launched into the speech he'd prepared the night before.
As you all know, I had a chance to visit with the Oberat in their sacred precinct. Minister Omelas was kind enough to show us his people's holy book.
That was McCoy's cue to hand the captain an electronic slate. Kirk glanced at it. He wanted to get the quote exactly right.
Correct me if I'm wrong, Minister Omelas, but your objection to the Kubaya is based on the following passage. No beast of forest or field shall set itself down on the sacred soil. That is indeed the basis for our protest, Captain. All right, then. Now, some time ago, we suggested to the Council that a predator, a Getrex, for instance, might be domesticated and left in the vicinity of your sacred ground.
That would be an outrage. The Getrexen are even less welcome than the Kubaya.
So we were informed, Minister Meneke. We then amended our suggestion, replacing an actual predator with the scent of one. That too was deemed inappropriate, as was a chemical compound that simulates such a scent. We even offered to supply a compound that copies the scent of a beast never seen on this planet, and that was rejected as well.
As it should have been, Captain. None of those strategies would satisfy our scriptures.
Fine. No beast smells. But what about the scent of a flower?
Again, Kirk consulted the electronic slate.
You shall adorn the sacred stones with all manner of flowers and growing things. Isn't that what your scripture says, Minister Omalas?
So it is. We have never objected to flowers in the sacred precinct. But I do not think a plant will accomplish your purpose, Captain. I have never heard of one that would keep a Kubaya away with its scent. In fact, the beasts are notoriously attracted to most strong-smelling flowers.
That's correct, as long as you limit the discussion to Malurian flowers.
Kirk whipped out his communicator.
Mr. Kyle, you can send down the specimen now.
It took only a second or two for a flowering plant with long, dark blue petals to materialize at the captain's feet. Kirk held it out to the monitor.
A Klingon fire blossom, gentlemen. It emits a scent that the Kubaya are sure to find unpleasant. I don't smell a thing. Well, of course not. You're not a Kubaya, and that's the beauty of it. No Malurian will be bothered by the scent, but it'll keep the beasts at a considerable distance.
Omalas regarded the doctor.
You know this for a fact.
Oh, I've had an opportunity to gather plenty of sensor data on the Kubaya, so I know how their olfactory systems work. Seems they're a lot like a Klingon beast called a Purus, and a Purus avoid fire blossoms like the plague.
Do you think we will call off our revolt on your word alone?
There's a way to prove I know what I'm talking about. I've already begun synthesizing compounds that copy the fire blossom scent. We can place them in the Kubaya's path, and if they turn away, we know we've got something.
And if not?
Oh, believe me, there won't be any if not.
For us to believe, we must be present, Doctor.
Suit yourself.
Meneke turned to his fellow Oberat.
You mean come out of hiding? That is impossible. There is another saying in the scriptures, Meneke. For the overly cautious, everything is impossible.